Welcome to School of Thought, an in-depth look at an action that has been taken by the Evergreen Public Schools Board of Directors that is having a positive impact on the students in our district. On today's show, we'll hear why the school board recently took a hard look at the issues surrounding school-sponsored student travel. And we'll hear how the changes that they've made to district policy will affect music groups, athletic teams, and other student organizations planning out-of-town trips. Joining us in the studio to talk about this are school board member Todd Yuzuriha and the district's director of secondary education, Ted Feller. I want to thank you both for being with us.
You bet.
So let's start with you, Todd. What changes were made to the policy?
Well, when we look at the student travel policy, it's an important policy because it affects the lives of so many of our students as well as their families. And as a school board, we recognize the benefits of certainly of classroom instruction and the learning that goes on there, but there can also be significant benefits and learning experiences outside the classroom. And so we wanted to have a policy that was fair across all the schools in our district, as well as we wanted to have the opportunity for every student in the district to have that chance to go on travel, you know, if it's a benefit to their academic careers. So we took a look at the policy over this last month and adopted a new policy on March 8th, mainly to simplify the policy, to merge two policies into one, and we also separated out the policies from the procedure.
And what is the policy?
Well, the policy is that every student that goes on overnight travel needs to get approval from the board. The group does. And we have some criteria to do that. And it goes along the lines of what we were talking about before, that we're always looking for academic learning experiences. We're looking for fairness. We're wanting to make sure every student has that opportunity to go. And at the same time, we're also very cognizant that we continually need to use taxpayer dollars wisely.
And Ted, how do you go about implementing that policy?
That's a great question. What we did is we looked at what the intent was the board had and tried to ensure that all students had the opportunity to go. So the implementation of the policies, we asked for certain information coming from the group or the for example, the band or the orchestra group that wants to go on a travel. And what we want to do is first is ask them is how are these experiences related to the education of those students in terms of the curriculum of that program. And then the second is how are we ensuring that all students, regardless of their economic condition, have the opportunity to go. And so we've asked the organization to, one, state the objectives of the trip, provide an itinerary of what the travel is, and then lastly is how do they set it up for students who can afford to go? How do they provide an opportunity for those students to go?
So how are these trips funded? Where does the funding come from for these trips?
Well, it varies on student travel. It can vary from anything from if the baseball team makes it to the state tournament, and that's a WIA sanctioned event, Washington Interscholastic Athletic Association event, that the district sponsors those. They pay for those trips that are because it's part of the whole the Washington State educational system. We also have some trips that are sponsored by Career and Technical Education program because it's part of their educational experience. And then we have other trips, such as the music programs, that are oftentimes sponsored by booster organizations. I will say that also within athletic events, if a team decided to travel to Yakima over the winter break, the wrestling team, to participate in a tournament, that would also be funded by the booster organization because it's an event, but it's not the playoffs, which are kind of different experiences. So they have a myriad of different kinds of funding sources. And so the ones that are sponsored from the district, that's relatively straightforward. The ones that are sponsored from the booster organizations, we want to just ensure that they're following the guidelines that a nonprofit organization needs to follow, and that we provided them enough guidance to think about the things in terms of ensuring that all of the students get to go.
So was there a particular issue that came up that the board felt it necessary to address, or was this just something that happened over time?
Well, we continually want to make sure that we have that fairness. And in the past, there were some proposals for trips that we felt may not be quite to the level of criteria of benefit that we wanted. You know, for instance, going out of state, way out of state to Hawaii, for instance, for a tournament. You know, in some cases that may be warranted, but we feel for that type of significant travel, it has to have a significant academic benefit. And so we just wanted to make sure, and we revised the policy a couple years ago, and I think that's when we did more of a major rewrite of the policy. This last thing we did was more of a tweak to the policy. But again, we just wanted to make sure we have language in the policy to have that fairness across the district, to have that uniformity across, you know, different student experiences, and again, to make sure that every student has that opportunity to participate.
Now, according to the criteria that would meet the district's policies, that is according to the organization, correct?
The criteria for, oh well, if, I mean, there's certain parts that are based on the organization. If it's a if a booster organization and they were going to provide scholarships or reduced rate for students who were in need, the question that we have from a district is how is the organization defining need, and then if there are other criteria for them to participate. One of the questions is a student who doesn't do anything, doesn't participate in any fundraisers, doesn't do any of those things, do they get the right to go regardless if they have need? And we said no, that they have to define need and merit, meaning that what would be the thing that they showed an interest and wanted to go? How would they go about participating in that? So if the organization is going to say both of those, then we just ask them to define that. We can give them suggestions and fundraising opportunity suggestions, but we really want the organizations to kind of think through how they're going to go about doing that. The reason why also that we need to know, because they're not technically the school district organizations, is when parents call and say, my son or daughter can't afford to go and we don't know how to do this and things, we need to be able to give those parents guidance to say, here's the contact, here's how you might do that, and to ensure that all students have that opportunity to go. So we're here to provide them guidance and technical support in terms of helping them develop those processes within their organization.
So what has the feedback been?
The initial feedback that I've received, and I've probably spent the most time in conversation with both teachers and program organizers and with parents, is I met when the policy was really starting to take hold in the fall of this year. I met with all the band, orchestra, and choir directors through our four high schools, and I talked to them about what the policy was and what that is. And honestly, my impression, what they gave me is that they appreciate this, they like it, but they wanted to make sure that it was equally done. And so, okay, but we all have to be on the same board. And I said, that's my job to make sure that we ensure that through that process. So now the process has been going through is they call, they ask directly to both to my administrative assistant and to myself about clarity about how to go about doing that. So we're more formalizing it and they're getting better definition by the experience. But so far everything's been positive. It's just really searching for clarity, trying to get some understanding and dealing with some clear communications about how they might go about doing that.
Do you see any additional challenges that might come up as this policy, you know, really takes hold and as you move forward in all of this?
I'd say that one of the comments that was made by the directors, and I would say is true, is the issue around equity and making and ensuring equal access to all students. And we have a diverse community, which is wonderful and great. But to ensure equity continues to be that challenge. And so there will be bumps in the road, there's no question, because as you're trying to make sure that you meet individual students and families' needs and trying to maintain these incredible programs that we have. And our music program is as good as any in the nation, and we're very proud of it. And part of these experiences about students being able to have these kinds of experiences are part of this program. When we're dealing with equity and when we're dealing with those challenges, there'll always be challenges to come up. But the message that we have received from the school board is that all the people in the community, all the students of the community are of equal value, and that we want to try to ensure that that happens. And there will always be challenges with that.
So under the district's policy, would students have the opportunity to do things like the going to the Tournament of Roses? That was huge.
That was huge.
Would the students still have that opportunity?
Absolutely. I mean, we recognize there's significant experiences that are, do come up, maybe even once in a lifetime, that you just can't miss. And I loved about your example about the Tournament of Roses, because my oldest daughter was in the Mountain View Band at the time they did get to go to that Tournament of Roses, and we did get to go down there, and just to see that band march down that street just gave me chills down my spine that I still remember today. And I know the students, got a lot out of that. And there's other experiences like the Evergreen Band getting to march in the inauguration parade, and the Union percussion ensemble being able to go to Chicago the last few months. I mean, be able to hear from those students and what they learned and what they experienced is just tremendous. And we definitely want to continue to facilitate those types of opportunities for our kids.
Okay. Well, School of Thought is all about basically talking about an issue where the school board has made a decision, and that has a positive impact on the students in the district. So I put out to you, how does this have a positive impact on the students in this district?
Well, I go back to our declaration and beliefs, and we believe that every student has the potential to grow and to succeed in life. And we feel so strongly about that in this travel policy, we want to make sure that every student has that opportunity. The other thing that we feel very strongly about is that every student will graduate world competitive. And through technology, you can get experiences outside the classroom, but there's no substitute in certain cases for face-to-face experiences with other schools, with other students in music, athletics, clubs. We want to facilitate that type of opportunity for our kids. And I think through this travel policy, it helps clarify, as Ted was saying, some of the things that we've been thinking about to make it fairer. And I think through that clarity helps morale and helps even more enthusiasm, because we have a great community. The parents that advocate for their kids, that want to go on these trips, and the community that supports them is just tremendous. And all we're trying to do here is to facilitate those opportunities in a fair manner and use taxpayer dollars as well very wisely.
And if I might add to that, is if you looked at what the school board's intent by taking a hard look at that policy and looking at it was that all the student travel or those big trips weren't all created equal. That the ones that you had mentioned were incredible events, but I believe that there were some concerns about whether all the travel was of equal worth and value. And so the band directors and the orchestra directors and the choir directors got together and said, you know what, the best thing for us, and this was a decision made by the group, is that we'll make a big trip every 3 years, as opposed to almost kind of having an arms race about travel. Like, if I don't go and the other high school goes, is it going to look like our program's not as good as their program? And that's not a healthy way of looking at student travel. So they're planning 3 years in advance for that big trip that will be meaningful and significant. So we're making trips of quality, just not quantity. And so when the taxpayers ask, or we ask us, are we really doing those things that are the most benefit for our students? The band directors have the permission, and I said, if I was on a diet and I said I didn't need to raid the refrigerator at midnight, somebody's going to have to lock the door sometimes, because at midnight I might want to eat. I'm going to be the door locker who says, okay, you said every 3 years, but they can make really high quality and make good choices and have the permission to be able to do that. So the fundraising can actually go to really significant events and not just kind of get in this travel arms race, which I think some of the reason were we wondering whether all travel was the same. And by doing that, we can ensure all students get those incredible experiences. And so that's, I think, how it will really benefit all students.
Well, Todd, thank you very much for joining us on this edition of School of Thought.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.